Hi, this is Dave from Potentially Monsters, and what you just heard is a little bit of a demo of a song from our upcoming record. Now, when we were creating that song or creating the demo, we had to create that high-pitched, kind of screechy drone sound that you're hearing. Now, we thought it'd be fun to share with you how I went about designing that sound and how I would go about designing a similar drone, something we like to play around with a lot, actually. So that was created out of two elements. One was a Boss Metal Zone using a feedback loop where we plug the metal zone into itself and then out into other pedals. I actually got that technique from a Simon the Magpie video, which I'll link down below in the comments. Now that, by itself, sounds like this. So I like that sound, but it's a little thin on its own, at least I thought it was. So I broke out my Arturia Microbrute and I used that to design this more sort of textural element that would fill it out a little bit. And that sounds like this. And together, they sound like this. So that's how we created that drone. So now we're going to walk through my process of how I would create a similar drone, starting with the metal zone. Okay, so let's get into how we actually go about making a drone using a no input setup. So what we have here is our metal zone. The metal zone is going into a splitter. I'm using a buffered splitter from JHS Pedals. This is kind of overkill for this scenario. You could really use any kind of Y splitter or, jury rigged adapters or however you would split one audio signal into two and it'll work. The idea is I need two outputs. One is going to go back into the input. That creates our feedback loop. And the other sends the product of that feedback loop out to the rest of our pedal chain, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I want to start off with just the metal zone. Let me just zero these knobs up or get them close to it anyway. Get everything pointing north. And let's just turn the pedal on. Let's see what it does. So here's what it does when we start out. Well, that's not terribly interesting, is it? Now, what is kind of interesting is if I turn the level, it gets quieter, but the pitch changes too. The pitch drops as I go up. Very odd. And I've got a compressor on to kind of at least limit how loud this can get. But, we hear some change. We hear some pitch change, though, and that's the more interesting thing. And that's kind of what every single knob on here has in common is it affects the pitch in some way or another. If I look at the high EQ and the low EQ, the high EQ, the pitch gets lower as I go down. It's getting higher as I turn up. If I look at the low EQ, pitch gets higher as I go down, gets lower as I turn up. Some interesting oscillation there when I have the two knobs sort of crossing over. They're close to each other, the high and the lows, and for some reason that's creating this oscillation. I don't entirely understand why. I'm not a man of science. If we look at the Boss Metal Zone had an interesting configuration for its mids. You have this outer ring that controls the mid frequency, and then you have an upper ring, an inner ring, which controls how loud that frequency is. So if I turn the mid frequency knob, feels like there may be a bit of an EQ sweep happening in there, but also changing the pitch. If I play with the mid level, again, kind of a mix of the two. It feels like we're sculpting out a lot of the high frequencies as we actually turn the pitch up, or bring them back in as we go down. So that's an interesting little thing that it does there. And again, when those two knobs are sort of crossing in a way, we get these oscillations, which is something we may actually be spending some time with shortly. But again, the distortion actually doesn't do much, generally. Unless I have an oscillation going, in which case it will have an effect on that oscillation, which can be pretty interesting and fun to play with. We're going to leave it up here for now. We'll actually just leave this like this. Actually, let's have a little bit of an oscillation going, and I'm just going to add some reverb. And again, we're using another JHS device, the JHS 3 Series reverb. I just like it's a simple, inexpensive reverb unit. It works well for my purposes. I can turn up the EQ on that a little. We go really crazy with the delay if we want. If we turn the reverb up, already getting some pretty interesting sounds out. But this wasn't quite what we were doing for the track I played you earlier. It's got this harsher sound, and this is cool, but it's not quite where we were, and that is where the Beatronic Swarm comes in. So this is a fuzz harmonizer, and I'm actually going to kill the reverb for a second so you can really hear the difference this is making. The Beatronic Swarm will add a ton of fuzz to it. It will also add a high and a low harmony, a high and a low drone relative to the pitch I give it. And that's something I can control as well. I'm not going to get too much into the controls. This isn't a gear demo. This is just sort of a general process thing. This is just something I like because it adds pitch. So I'm going to go ahead and engage that pedal. Immediately, we're a little bit more interesting. And now if I bring that reverb back in, now that we've got some color. And now we've got something, now I'm not nailing it exactly. I'll be honest, I don't recall exactly where I had my knobs that fateful night when I made that other recording. But we can do similar things. And I think one of the things we are going to note here is while we have a lot of that sound, we're also missing something. There's this kind of textural component living under this that's missing, and that's something I did using a Arturia microbrute to kind of fill the sound out. So in the next part of this video, we're going to get into how we produce that to fill out the space under this horrible noise. Okay, this is going to be the Arturia microbrute section of the tutorial. With the metal zone, we created the main part of our drone, the part that's going to kind of stand out in the mix. In this portion, we're going to add some texture to it, some dynamics to it. It's going to make it sound a little bit more dynamic is actually what I mean to say. I like the microbrute because I'm pretty new to synthesizers, particularly analog synths, and this is a good starting point for me. It's a simple, fairly inexpensive synthesizer that I think is a pretty good learning platform. So what I have going on in here right now is, first off, over in the oscillator section. So what I have right now is I have the pulse turned on, and I have the pulse width turned about to the middle, so nothing too drastic. It's the sound we're getting right now. Yeah, that's thrilling. Not really anywhere near what we are looking for. That's not really percussive in the way that I'm thinking about. So the thing that's going to be super important here is going to be the envelope. It's going to be the thing that makes the biggest difference. That gives us 4 settings: attack, decay, sustain, and release. And what I actually want to do here is I want to turn these all the way down. And the reason I want to do that is because I want short, kind of popping sounds. Now that's a little bit too slight. Now, we don't really want to raise the attack because, well, think about a percussion instrument. The attack is very quick. It's not very long. So the second I start adding attack in, we kind of start losing anything that sounds percussive at all. Now, on the other hand, decay can retain a percussive sound. That's cool, and we're going to use that. Sustain is similar. So these are going to be sort of the tools that we're going to ride to kind of get our sounds. For the short term, I kind of like this, maybe with a little less sustain. I think that sounds pretty cool. Let's start with that. Now, the next thing we want to be able to do is automate playing a lot of these notes quickly, at least for, again, the kind of sound I'm going for, because I don't want to sit here having to do that. I don't want to play into the keyboard if I don't actually have a line I want to play. It's kind of a waste of effort. So we have a sequencer built in. It's a very simple sequencer. It holds 8 sequences. Now, I bought this used, and there were sequences programmed in already, and I'm using those because I am lazy and they work for me. So we're set to the first one here. I'm actually going to turn the rate down so we can hear what it does a little bit more easily. And I'm going to hit play on the sequencer. So now it's going to play a sequence of notes relative to whatever I hold down on the keyboard. Okay, that's cool. That works for me. What we can do basically is, because and I'm thinking about it, I keep saying textural, there's a reason for it, is that I don't want the listener to really be hearing individual notes in a line like that. And one way I can achieve that actually, and getting rid of the attack is one way that we do that. The more decay and sustain we bring in, the more of the actual note we have. So we can also use those as levers. But the rate also helps me here, where we're not really thinking so much about individual notes. And I kind of dig this sound. Now, what if we turn this up a little bit? How's that sound? We'll play with that for now. And there's one last thing I like to do on the synth itself that gives me just a little bit more leverage, which is I like to take advantage of the mod matrix. There's a very small, very simple patch bay that even an inexperienced person like me can use and understand. So what it gives me is here 2 outputs, meaning elements of this synthesizer that I can use to control other elements, and then 6 inputs that I can control. And the ones I want to focus on here is first off our envelope, because it's important to us in more than one way. And then I want to map that to the pitch. So our pitch will now be controlled by the envelope settings. So now when I hit this, it sounds a little bit different. And as I play with the envelope amount, I can kind of blend that in. Now, exactly how it's affecting it, I mean, I know here when I turn down, it's completely gone. It seems to both be affecting it more and raising the pitch more as I turn. So we can see between that and the sustain and the release, I have these levers I can turn in order to adjust the sound. The last thing I'm going to do here is something that's going to happen in the DAW. I'm a big fan of Valhalla plugins. I am a big fan of the Valhalla Supermassive. This is like a stereo chorus. These are my settings that I use for this specific application. Now, when I turn this on, we're going to be in kind of a very different space here. So now, and part of what I like is in the decay of that chorus, or of the delay, I should say. We get a good amount of noise in there, which really kind of fills the space out for the sort of drone that I am looking for. So what we are going to do now is basically what we would do to actually play in, which is I would pull the key down and I would start playing with different parameters of the envelope. And play with the decay, lean it in and out. Same with the sustain. And there we have, it's messy. We kind of threw it together, but I think that is a perfectly usable sound. And now we're going to go see what we have in totality after we have worked with both the Metal Zone along with the chain of pedals I worked with there, and here with the Arturia Microbrute. The drone we created with the Metal Zone sounded like this, and the Microbrute sounded like this. And together we got something like this. And these are the sort of things I would use to add atmosphere, or in this case, tension, because it's kind of a harsh sound, to our compositions. But you could really do a lot of different things with this. You can also use this loopback technique on a number of different devices. It'll work with mixers. It will work with a number of different synths. It will work with a number of different guitar pedals. I do, again, recommend checking out that Simon the Magpie video for details on how to do this and how to do it safely without risking damage to your equipment. Now, as far as we're concerned, we're going to be bringing you more musical content. We have a record coming out within the next few months. We'll be dropping new videos and new cover songs and other music-related material, so please give us a like here. Please share the video. comment, subscribe, all that other stuff that YouTube creators tell you to do. You can also check us out over on Instagram at Potentially Monsters and on Spotify or your favorite music streaming services. And we will see you real soon.